Hello, this podcast is called Boondoggle. It is political commentary by a disgruntled libertarian. I thought about bringing this podcast for a while, but didn't really ever get round to doing it. Finally have, impelled really by the shooting of Renee Good in Minnesota recently by, I believe the agent's name is Jonathan Ross. At least that is what the AP was reporting yesterday. So I think, I just have to get this out here. First of all, I'm a libertarian. I did not vote for either candidate in the last, either major candidate in the last race. I think of myself as something of an observer. I see about 45% of the population on one side of a dispute and 45% on the other side of the dispute. And about 8% of us trying to say, hey, stop fighting with each other and being distracted, because 2% is trying to take over the world and kill us all. That's kind of how it feels to be in the middle of this dispute. When Charlie Kirk was executed, I was fighting against the left. Now that Renee Good has been sort of killed, I think, with the excessive, unreasonable use of deadly force, considering the totality of the circumstances and under the objective reasonable officer test, which we will get to, I'm now fighting with the right. It seems that I'm always trying to stop one side or the other from abrogating the Constitution in defense of their emotional position that they have, I think, been brainwashed to take. We've basically in the midst of a cybernetic civil war, with the right being pitted against the left and the left being pitted against the right. And if you're kind of aware of the Hegelian dialectic, it seems that the idea is to foment a synthesis of absolute power from these two sides basically beating it out until only a centralized authoritarian government exists, and we've given up the Constitution as an inconvenience. In other words, we try to save the Constitution by suspending it. We try to save the United States of America by destroying it. None of this makes any sense, and it seems that the American people have forgotten their inherent God-given sovereignty that this country was founded on. Quick note, I know I have an accent. I was raised in England. I was born in the United States. I'm an American citizen. I've been an American citizen longer than I've been English. I like to think I was made in England, but I moved back to the United States after my parents divorced, and I went over there with my mother back around 95. I've been here ever since. I get into the wrong side of the car in the United Kingdom. Basically, I think of myself as an American, despite the voice. Nonetheless, growing up overseas, at least in my formative years, does give me a somewhat objective viewpoint of the United States. I'm a great lover of the Constitution. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I believe strongly in the First Amendment. I definitely believe in the Fourth Amendment, which is really what this podcast is about. So let's just get into the issues, because I don't want to waste too much time. You're busy. I'm busy. I've got things to do. This is important enough, however, that I wanted to express myself. And again, my wife is tired of hearing it. So I'm talking to you. Okay. So let's get into the nitty-gritty here. We have video footage of a number of ICE agents basically confronting a woman who appears to have been agitating, protesting, blocking the roadway. She's likely guilty of disturbing the peace. She's likely guilty of obstructing the federal agents in the course of their duty. And so nonetheless, a couple of agents get out of a vehicle. One has gone around the other side with a camera, and she is basically confronted by an angry ICE agent yelling at her to get out of the car. He's got his arms into her window and is trying to open her door. That's something we need to talk about perhaps later on. there's a Fourth Amendment interest there, that there's a right to privacy in the vehicle. Does he have jurisdiction? Was she harboring illegal aliens? Was she transporting them across state boundary? What is the federal jurisdiction of the police power here? We're going to get into all of that. And then she probably freaks out. I think she's panicking. I think she realizes the error of her ways and that this is a very bad situation that she doesn't want to be in. And so she tries to drive away. Now, depending on who you are and how you sort of view the evidence, she either tried to run over the ICE agent who she probably didn't see, who came around from her right side, from the passenger side of the vehicle, and is in front of the vehicle, pulls out his gun. He discharges 3 shots, 1 through the windshield, 2 through the window, killing her. The car drives on, so he doesn't stop the car, and it veers off and crashes into a parked vehicle on the side of the road, on the left-hand side of the road. She's either trying to escape, according to one side, she's trying to kill the ICE agent on the other. So what we need to do, essentially, is devolve the question down to whether or not deadly force was justified. Now, according to the right, in this case, absolutely the officer felt threatened. His life was in danger. The automobile is a deadly weapon. He absolutely had the right to shoot her. Okay, so let's say that she was trying to kill him. Let's say that she had the intent to hit him, or at least to move him out of the way forcibly with the vehicle, which is the deadly weapon, and then drive away, to go home, to escape, whatever, right? She was actually trying to kill him. That does not change the reasonable officer test by which deadly force and the use thereof is justified. So we can take the worst case scenario and we can still devolve the question. Ultimately, to dispose of this question, we have to determine when deadly force is justified. And fortunately for us, in the United States of America, unlike communist China or communist Russia, which is weird that the right is defending an excessive use of deadly force because they sound like the communists. To me, the right wing has gone communist all of a sudden. Commies. Xi Jinping. They talk about Trump derangement syndrome. I'm talking about she-think. They have she-think. But luckily for us, in the United States of America, the government does not have an inherent right to kill its citizens. The government can kill its citizens in very stringent and limited circumstances, none of which apply in this case, even if she was trying to run him over. Why? Because she had not committed a dangerous felony. She had not and was not about to murder or maim another person. She was directing her vehicle, taking the right's opinion, at this ICE agent. The ICE agent was probably 3, maybe 5 feet in front of the vehicle, I think less. We see her reverse. She's moving forward. She's not even going 3 miles an hour when the first shot is discharged. The officer clearly had opportunity to move to the side and allow the vehicle to go past. That is the critical question. Could the officer have taken a reasonable, safer alternative to neutralize the threat and protect himself, which includes, expressly in the law, moving out of the way of the vehicle? And in this case, the answer, I think, is unequivocally yes. The reality is they were trying to reopen the road so that they could go about their business and arrest corrupt Somalis and illegal aliens. Good for them. When they get out of the car and they confront this woman and she panics, if he had moved out of the way and she had backed up and tried to kill him, then okay, he could shoot her. If she pulled a gun, okay, he could shoot her. But if she just drove away, round that car with the door open to her right and sped off home, they could have reopened the road, meeting their primary objective. They could have gone about arresting illegal aliens, which is their duty, and they could have just returned to work. They could also maybe have issued a warrant for her arrest. They had her license plate. They could have issued a warrant with judicial order and had her arrested for obstructing a federal investigation. I'm not sure a judge would approve that warrant, but nonetheless, that's why we have due process, and that's why we have the Fourth Amendment, and that's why we live in America. So let's not forget that crucial and important point. We are American citizens. We live in the United States of America. We have a Fourth Amendment right to be protected in our person and property effects from unreasonable searches and seizures. So, if the officer could get out of the way, there is no imminent threat. The use of deadly force in this instance was completely unreasonable. Now, you've heard the right say things like, oh, well, he had been hit by a car before. He had been dragged 100 yards. He had 50 stitches in his right arm. He was traumatized by this episode. Then why is he confronting an automobile with his gun drawn? Why isn't he receiving mental help? I don't think having a traumatized officer who is trigger sensitive as a result of previous trauma in his life is a reasonable deployment of police power. But even if it was, he still had the ability to just simply step aside. The reason he didn't step aside wasn't because he was trying to stop her, because you can't stop a moving vehicle. He was shooting her for disobeying a direct order. Get out of the car, you're under arrest. Get out of the car, you're under arrest. No, I'm going home. Bang, now you're dead. That's not an appropriate or reasonable use of lethal force. She could have been arrested at any time. They had a license plate. We have a car. It's all on video, unless she's driving a stolen vehicle. Was there a reasonable suspicion she was driving a stolen vehicle? No. Was there probable cause that she was driving a stolen vehicle? No. Was she transporting illegal aliens in the vehicle? No. Did she cross state lines with an illegal alien in the vehicle? No. Did the federal agents have the right to push their arm into her car and demand she exit the vehicle? Maybe. Maybe not. It's probably an escalatory action that was unnecessary under the circumstances, considering their primary objective was to arrest illegal aliens and, in this case, open the roadway. If they could have solved the obstruction of the roadway by her moving away, wouldn't that be a more efficient use of their duty, of their deployment, so they could return to work instead of shooting an American who's a libtard, who's misguided and annoying and obnoxious, and just killing her? They could have gone about arresting corrupt Somalis, defrauding all of us of $8 billion. But no, he shot her. So let's actually read the law, because I think this is important. We have a law in this country. God bless America. We have a law. And the law about deadly force is quite clear, and I think it's quite settled. It literally says, and this is from the Department of Justice website, you can look this up, the Department of Justice policy on the use of force, it comes out of that case I quoted before, Graham versus Connor in 1989, a U.S. Supreme Court case. It's the law of the land. And it basically says that the decision to use force requires careful attention to the facts and circumstances of each particular case, including the severity of the crime at issue. What was the severity of the crime at issue? Disturbing the peace, a misdemeanor. Obstructing a federal investigation, probably in this case a misdemeanor. Assault on a police officer, okay, that could be a felony. Again, he had an escape route. He could have stepped aside. He did not need to kill her to neutralize the threat. He could have moved his bodily person out of the way of the vehicle, and they could have arrested her later for assault on on an officer and given her a big fat felony. That would have been a much better outcome, probably, than murdering her and leaving 3 kids orphans and now wards of the state, which we're going to have to pay for, so thanks for that too. Whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officer or others. Okay, now that's the essential question. Was she posing an imminent threat to the officer or others? I don't think she was posing an imminent threat to others. That doesn't seem to be an argument. There's certainly no evidence of that on the video. Was she posing an imminent threat to the officer? That's the essential question. Well, imminent actually means something. It means clear, present, and basically there's no other outcome other than bodily harm or death, right? Under an objective standard. If we have a subjective standard for police officers who feel threatened and thereby justify the use of deadly force because I felt threatened, we have tyranny. We have communist China. We have communist Russia. We have an objective test under the reasonable officer standard to prevent the abuses of the police power, which expressly belong not to the federal government, but to the states. That's under the Constitution. Yes, it was changed in the 1950s or whenever it was that Hoover managed to get the FBI through. How did Hoover get the FBI through? He used the Commerce Clause. He used the Commerce Clause that allows the federal government to regulate commerce between the several states. So, the FBI's jurisdiction is limited, just like the federal court's jurisdiction is limited. That courts have limited jurisdiction. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has a limited jurisdiction of federal extent, which requires cross-state crimes. She's blocking an officer in the course of his duties. His job is to remove her, not kill her. Okay, so let's actually read from the Department of Justice's website what it says regarding the use of deadly force and prohibited restraint techniques. 1. Deadly force may not be used solely to prevent the escape of a fleeing suspect. In other words, you can't shoot a suspect in the back when he's running away. 2. Firearms may not be discharged solely to disable moving vehicles. You can't shoot a guy driving away in his car. Not allowed. Specifically, firearms may not be discharged at a moving vehicle unless, and here's the critical issue, a person in the vehicle is threatening the officer or other person with deadly force by means other than the vehicle. If she pulled a gun on him, he could have shot her. Absolutely. Or two, this is the question, the essential question that everybody's arguing about, although they keep getting distracted between, well, they killed Charlie Kirk, and you celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk, and you killed this person, and Irena, whatever her name was on the bus, got killed, and everyone's got killed, and the left's mad, and the right's mad, and you're all crazy. Focus on the issue. Was deadly force justified? So number two, unless the vehicle is operated in a manner that threatens to cause death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. Right, she's trying to run him over. It threatens death or serious physical injury to the officer, right? Sure. And, this is the important part, this is and, not or, and, right? So, death or serious injury to the officer or others, and no other objectively reasonable means of defense appear to exist, and here's the clincher, which includes moving out of the path of the vehicle. Did the officer have an ability to move out of the path of the vehicle? That's the question. If he did, shooting her was unreasonable. Whether she was trying to run him over or not. That's the thing. You don't have to kill someone. You have the law. You can incarcerate them at a later time. You can arrest them for felony assault on an officer. There's a million things you can do that are more reasonable and actually safer than shooting her. So let's think about, did the shooting neutralize him being run over? He was literally, according to the right and according to the video and according to all the comments on X and all the arguments I've been having with people, he was on the hood of the car, right? He had his hands on the hood of the car. Okay, so he's literally less than 3 feet away from the car when she starts moving forward. He has plenty of time to get out of the way. In fact, you can see him lean in to shoot, and his feet are on the side of the car, on the right side of the car. Only one bullet goes through the windshield. 2 go through the window. Right? He clearly was able to move out of the way. He almost kills her immediately as the car is accelerating. The car doesn't suddenly veer after he's been shot. It continues on its path, and then it rolls off to the side because she's dead. Because she's dead. That's what happened. Him shooting her did not stop that car from its trajectory. Him shooting her did not decrease the velocity of that car. In fact, it sped up and then slowed down when it crashed into the car parked on the side of the road. Him shooting her was not only not neutralizing the threat, was not only unreasonable considering safer alternatives existed, it was reckless and dangerous because her car continued on unpiloted down the road and could have hit somebody. He discharged a firearm in a neighborhood. He shot 3 times at close range and killed a woman for protesting. Now, I don't agree with her position. I don't agree with her politics, right? I don't think she should have been obstructing officers in their duty. Of course, maybe she could be charged with a misdemeanor. Maybe she could have been charged with felony assault on an officer. Certainly something they should have tried. But she's dead, so that's not going to happen. What I cannot agree with is the use of deadly force to murder her simply because the officer believes he felt threatened subjectively in a situation where a reasonable officer would have acted otherwise. And that is the test. How a reasonable officer would have acted on the scene in the same or similar circumstances. That objective standard is what is an issue. If he could do this, if he could shoot her because subjectively he felt threatened, even though multiple reasonable, safer alternatives existed, and even though the agents themselves had escalated the situation and basically caused the threat that they're complaining of, then there is no objective test. And police can just use lethal force when they feel threatened. Which could be, for example, a DUI stop. You're driving towards a gate. They tell you to stop. You're drunk, so you don't realize what's going on, and you just keep driving. They can shoot you. They can shoot you because you're driving at them and you're refusing to stop the vehicle. They can essentially shoot you for disobeying an order, which I think is really what happened here. You had people get mad and pissed off at the left because they're libtards, and she was yelling at them. She was obstructing their job. It's already a difficult job. They've already been attacked. They're fed up of being whistled at and have things thrown at them. They're angry. It's understandable. So that's why they killed her. They killed her for disrespecting their authority. I'm a fucking federal agent. That's the attitude. You know what? Fuck you, right? Don't you drive off. How dare you? Bang. Whoops. So let's get back to this test. Another horrible situation, and what is alarming to me, is that you've got the Vice President of the United States immediately going onto television before any investigation has even been started, let alone concluded, saying that this officer has complete immunity, saying that it was self-defense, positioning conclusions that essentially taint a jury pool from his office, excusing federal police power, which is constitutionally questionable. Its jurisdiction is an issue with an American citizen, and basically making a legal conclusion. So J.D. Vance went to Yale Law School. Clearly he knows the damn law. Surely he read Marbury versus Madison, in which Justice Marshall, one of my heroes, said, "It is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is." Basically, not the executive. The executive does not get to say what the law is. That's why we have a separation of powers. That's why this is America. God bless America. That's why this is God's country. God bless America. This is not communist Russia. All of you guys on the right, and I am a conservative, I'm a libertarian. I resigned from an office in the Libertarian Party because they're all nuts, unfortunately. I wish they weren't, but there's too many nutters in the Libertarian Party. There's too many nutters in the Green Party. There's too many nutters everywhere, it seems. But the right wing sounds like communist China. The right has become communist on this issue. It's like a complete inversion. It's basically black magic. There's a cybernetic civil war being fomented against the sovereigns, the people of the United States. We're not subjects. We are sovereigns. That's what makes this God's country. God bless America. There is a civil war being fomented cybernetically, pitting right against left, liberal against conservative, whatever the hell that means, in order to create the synthesis of absolute power. Absolute power requires a police power, which the federal government expressly does not have under the Constitution, although granted, it may have a right, and legally today it does, to police cross-border interstate crime, FBI, to police the border, immigration, ICE, TSA. But originally, the founders, very sensibly, reserved the police power expressly to the states because they feared the power of a centralized government. And I think this is clearly an issue when you have a federal officer who has used an unnecessary deadly force to kill an American citizen and is now being sheltered by the executive branch claiming federal immunity. And here's the problem. It would be hard to bring a criminal suit against the Jonathan Ross, the agent, I believe that's his name. It would be hard to bring suit against him because under the supremacy clause, the federal government probably has to bring that charge, right? The states can sue the government, but in this situation, it is likely that if they wanted to, they could rely on the supremacy clause to say, it's our jurisdiction, man. We get to charge him, and we're not going to charge him, right? So that's why the police power was reserved expressly for the states, because otherwise you have the ability for the government to circumvent, the federal government to circumvent the Constitution and perform acts that basically abrogate inalienable rights that belong to American citizens, not talking about illegal aliens here, and basically perpetrate a usurpation of the state. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that the vice president would go on record without saying something like, you know, we have an investigation going. This is a regrettable incident. You know, it's bound to happen, unfortunately, where there's such division and you've got all the fomenting of hatred on, you know, one side or another. He likes to blame Waltz. He likes to blame the left. He basically is guilty of the thing he's accusing Waltz of inciting violence. And, you know, oh, they've been calling us Nazis. What do you expect? This is what you get. You're a liberal idiot. And therefore, you know, he's doing the same thing. He's fomenting violence against the other side. Ordinarily, a responsible elected official would recognize he doesn't have the right to interpret the law, and he would say, we have people investigating it, let's wait for the facts to come out, we have more evidence, we have more footage that is yet to be shared. There's more footage out there. So let's see what happens. I do predict that a wrongful death suit with a jury of Renee Good's peers will find wrongful death, negligent homicide at the minimum, and the taxpayer will be paying millions of dollars to Miss Good's estate.